Welcome to Age Pension, Super and Retirement. I am your host Yvonne, and as always, this podcast is information only and not personal advice. Today's topic is on grandparents, and we will be looking at how grandparents can be supported by Centrelink, also how some grandparent choices affect the age pension. To do so, I'd like to welcome back Rebecca.
Hi, Yvonne. I've got some interesting scenarios today, so I'm looking forward to it.
So am I. Let's start with Jenny, who asks, my grandchildren are preschool age and live close by. Their parents, my daughter and son-in-law, are working so hard. Can I care for them while their parents are at work? Can I get the childcare subsidy instead of the daycare centre getting it? I'm on job seeker payment and my husband is on the age pension. Can I look after my grandkids instead of doing volunteer work?
Okay, so this is sort of a fairly common scenario where, grandparents are living close by to their grandchildren. There's a need for childcare and there's grandparents who are, willing to provide it. And that's a nice situation. So the question's here about how does it impact the finances? So obviously, yes, if you want to care for your grandchildren and your parents are willing to do that, then yeah, go for it. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. And that can be a way to save the parents on daycare fees, build a good relationship with your grandchildren and just enjoy that time when they're young. Yeah, you can do lots of fun things with them. The questions though is around how it works in terms of childcare subsidy and there's a question here about job seeker payment as well. Let's talk about the childcare side of it first. Childcare subsidy is a payment made by the government to parents to help reduce the cost or subsidise the cost of childcare. Childcare centres charge roughly ballpark figures $150 a day per child. Depending on the parent's level of income and activity level, the government will pay a portion of that fee to the childcare centre to subsidise and reduce the cost to the parents. Yeah, depending on the family's situation, that might reduce the cost from $150 to $100 a day or to $50 a day or even down to $20 a day, depending on the situation. Can the grandparent receive the childcare subsidy instead? Basically, no. A grandparent is not a registered or approved childcare facility or childcare provider. So grandparents can't get childcare subsidy for looking after their own grandchildren. It doesn't work like that. So you can't do that. There are some situations where a grandparent will actually set up a family daycare service and, enroll their grandchildren in it. But to be set up as a legit service, you have to have a certain number of children in your care that are not related to you, which is a way of, making sure people aren't just rorting the system by looking after their own relatives and claiming government payments for it. So the government does not want people set up looking after their relatives and getting paid by the government to do so. Basically, no, that doesn't happen. If you feel like you need money to help offset the costs or cover the costs of caring for your grandchildren, then the place to go to for that money is the parents of the grandchildren. And you can work out something with them. You might say, you're paying this much to the daycare centre, why don't you pay me $50 a day instead, or whatever you come up with. Yeah, you can do that as an informal arrangement where the parents just pay you something instead of paying the daycare centre. So no, the grandparents can't get the childcare subsidy. But then there's a question about being on job seeker payment. Just to sort of recap job seeker payment. So Jenny's saying she's married, her husband's on age pension, but she's not old enough for that yet. And so she's on job seeker payment. And that's completely legitimate. You can be on job seeker payment when you're in your 60s or even younger, especially when the older partner is on age pension. The income limits are kind of rather flexible or rather generous. So the younger partner is often able to be on job seeker payment. One of the requirements of being on job seeker payment is that you are either working or looking for work or doing approved volunteer work of at least 15 hours a week. And so Jenny's kind of wondering, well, if I look after my grandchildren for 2 days a week, can that count as the 15 hours of volunteer work? And that would kind of be a nice little trade-off, look after your grandkids 2 days a week in exchange for job seeker payment from the government. But no, that is not allowed as an approved volunteer activity. So yeah, that's not going to work. That's not going to happen. Jenny might be able to do, 2 days a week of volunteer work somewhere else, maybe at her, I say a local op shop because that's an easy thing to think of, but there's lots of different volunteer opportunities, not just op shops. Yeah, maybe she can do 2 days a week at her local op shop, and then she's got other days of the week where she can look after the grandchildren, or maybe her husband can look after the grandchildren 2 days a week while she's doing volunteer work, and then the rest of the time they've got to enjoy their retirement. So a few things there. The government will not pay grandparents to provide babysitting or childcare for their grandchildren, but you can still do it. You're just not going to get paid by the government or Centrelink for doing so.
Such a great clarification, Rebecca. Thank you so much. Now, Barry asks, my grandson is 20 and has special needs. He lives with his mother but spends time at my house. I have a big shed and he loves to tinker with old cars with me. His mum gets carer payment and carer allowance. He spends 2 days a week with me on the farm. Can I get carer allowance for this?
Doesn't this sound lovely? Barry's grandson loves to spend time with him and hang around on the farm and tinker in the shed and things like that. But this kind of arrangement where he's like just coming for the day and spending the day and then going back home, this is not a situation where Barry would be able to get carer allowance. Carer allowance is paid to somebody who provides constant, as in daily care for someone with a disability. So the mum in this situation, she's providing daily care for her son, and so she's eligible for those payments. Barry is helping out and giving his daughter a break and, caring for his grandson during the day, looking after him, giving him things to do, and which is wonderful, but it's not something that would be considered constant care in order to get carer allowance. Even if the grandson slept over and, maybe spent, say, 2 nights a week at Barry's house, that still wouldn't be considered enough care for carer allowance purposes. Like I would say to Barry, keep doing it. It's wonderful, but no, that's not something that Centrelink is going to pay for.
Now, Cheryl asks, my grandchildren have been placed into my care through child protection. I had to give up work to look after them. They're aged 2 and 6. What Centrelink supports can I get?
Okay, so this is a situation where you're much more likely to be eligible for Centrelink support. Yeah, there's no context here about what's happened in these kids' lives, but obviously something big. The parents aren't able to look after them anymore for whatever reason. And child protection, or it's called different things in different states, but they're going to look for someone who is able to safely care for the children, and they've found the grandparent, Cheryl. One thing to note is that when grandchildren have come into your care through a child protection type scenario, there is often an eligibility for support payments from child protection itself or from the state government, which is separate to Centrelink. Centrelink is federal. So from the state government, they call it different things in different states, but something like a carer allowance, which is not for disability related care, it's just for providing care for a child in your care. Compared to Centrelink payments, it's actually a fairly generous amount. It's sort of meant to actually cover the costs of having the child in your care. If you compare it to what Centrelink pays, you're like, wow, that's actually a lot of money. Yeah, because it's well over and above what Centrelink pays, because it's kind of acknowledging that, well, it's not really your responsibility to pay for everything for these kids, but they've landed in your lap. So we want to support you to pay for everything the child needs so that they are not disadvantaged. You don't want a child in this care situation to be disadvantaged because the home that they've gone to is a lower income home. You want them to have every opportunity to have their needs met. Yeah, the payments that you can get from the state government is really important there. Again, each state does it differently, but they will pay an amount based on the age of the child. And then if there's any special needs, disability needs, there's often tiered amounts. So the higher the level of disability or care requirements, the higher the payment that you can get because the costs are going to be higher. That's really important. That it depends on how it all went down, whether you can get those payments or not, but definitely look into that and ask the child protection place if you can apply for those payments. Separate to that, there is the Centrelink support. So Centrelink is the federal government. So Cheryl, she said she's had to give up work to look after them. She's going to need some kind of income support. Now, depending on her situation, so she hasn't said whether she's single or partnered. If she's single, she's likely to be eligible for income support. So when you've got young children, so she's got a 2 and a 6-year-old in her care, often you're going to be looking at parenting payment. But depending on how old Cheryl is, if she's under 67, then parenting payment would be the one to go for. If she's over 67, then age pension is probably a better deal. So that's the income support side of it. And then there's also family tax benefit. Family tax benefit is a supplementary payment to help with the costs of raising children. It's paid based on the age of the child in your care and your family income. That would be another one to apply for. Now, if Cheryl has a partner or a spouse, then the spouse's income is going to be factored into the equation. It is looked at as a household. If Cheryl's got a husband that's earning a decent wage, then the amount of Centrelink support is going to be reduced. But the payments that I mentioned before, so that the payments from the state government are not income-based. So they would just be based on their formula, but it's not to do with income. But the Centrelink payments, they are based on income and assets. So, depending on Cheryl's financial situation, including her spouse, if she has one, is going to influence what she can get from Centrelink. There's also childcare support. So these are young children. The 2-year-old at least is childcare age. The 6-year-old is probably in primary school, but may need before and after school care or vacation care during school holidays. For childcare subsidy, so I mentioned before that childcare subsidy helps to reduce the cost of out-of-pocket fees for childcare for families. In this situation, when you've got a grandchild in your care, there is a special childcare subsidy. It's called additional childcare subsidy for grandparents. When the grandparent is on an income support payment, it qualifies the grandparent for this special category of childcare subsidy, and it actually covers the full cost of childcare for those grandchildren. So if Cheryl's eligible for income support, she would actually be able to put the 2-year-old in childcare and not pay anything. It's a way of the government going, look, again, this is landed in your lap. We want these children to have the best opportunities, for early childhood care education, all of those things. So we're going to cover that cost. And that then allows Cheryl, she might be able to go back to work if she's able to get the childcare situation sorted. So the grandparent childcare subsidy is available to help with that, but it's only if the grandparent is eligible for income support. So if you've got a situation where maybe Cheryl's husband is working and earning enough so that she is not eligible for income support, then they would not get the free childcare or the fully subsidised childcare. They would still be eligible for childcare subsidy, but it would be based on their income. So it might be 90% covered or 80% covered, but it's based on income. Another thing to look at with this is a kinship carer healthcare card. So any time that a child is in the care of not their natural parents, but it might be an aunt or a grandparent or somebody who's a family member but not the natural parent, the child is able to get a healthcare card as a foster care or kinship care healthcare card. So that's something to look at. That means that the child can get access to cheaper medications and often reduced medical fees, that kind of thing. That's the foster child or kinship child healthcare card. There's also a special payment called the double orphan payment. In a situation where a child where both their parents have died, they are considered a double orphan. It's only a small amount, but it is a little bit of extra money paid to the carer of the child. I guess it's compensating for the fact that there's no child support payments coming in from anywhere. It's just these grandparents, that's who's looking after the kids. So that's available when both parents have died, or in some situations where you don't know the whereabouts of one of the parents and the other one's died. So it's kind of a uncommon, hopefully, situation, but there is payment, a small payment available for in that situation. And that's in addition to the other payments available. So what have I covered? Parenting payment or age pension, family tax benefit, grandparent childcare subsidy, kinship carer, healthcare card, and the double orphan pension. One other thing in that situation is the kinship carer exemption from looking for work. So in a situation where if you are on a payment that has mutual obligations required, so they're expecting you to look for work in exchange for your payment, then when you've got a grandchild in your care, you are exempt from that requirement to look for work. So, and in some situations, it gives you a slightly higher rate of income support. So that's something to be aware of. If you've got a grandchild in your care and Centrelink's saying to you, okay, it's time to start looking for work now because the child's reached a certain age, you can say to them, oh, hang on, this is not my natural child. This is my grandchild or, my niece or whatever, and they can put that exemption in place. Yeah, there are a lot of supports available when a grandchild has been placed into your care. It is income and asset based, so it's not the same for everyone. But yeah, definitely look into the state government supports if it's a child protection type of situation, because that gives you quite a bit of extra support to help with the costs of the children.
Rebecca, that was just such a full and extraordinary answer. Thank you so much. And for anyone that is affected by this, you may want to rewind. There was an absolute amazing amount of information there. Thank you, Rebecca.
That's okay. And for anyone in that situation, that Centrelink actually does have a grandparents phone line. So they have a specific department that will assist grandparents to find all these things that they're eligible for. So that phone number is 1-800-245-965. So that's the grandparents line or grandparent foster and kinship carer line. That kind of gets you hopefully straight through to a department that understands this situation.
Now, Karen asks, years ago, we promised our kids that we would pay for private school education for our grandchildren. I was shocked to hear from my financial planner that paying for their private school fees would be seen as gifting by Centrelink. I don't understand. We aren't doing this on a whim. We made this decision years ago. Why is this considered gifting? Is there a better way we can help our kids attend private school?
Okay, so why is it gifting? It's gifting because these school fees are not your expenses. They're not your children and it's not your household expenses. That's why it's gifting. So if you are sending your child to private school, then that's your expense and it would not be considered gifting. It would just be considered your own expense. Grandchildren are a step removed. They're not actually your financial responsibility to pay for them to go to school. It's the parents' responsibility. So, regardless of what promises you've made, when it comes to giving the money, and even if you pay the school directly, if it goes, from your bank account straight to the school, it's still considered gifting because it's not your expense. It's somebody else's expense. Yeah, you've made this decision years ago and you're not doing it to get a bit higher pension. You're not doing it to get something out of it in that way. But it is still considered gifting. You shouldn't see that you're being penalised for gifting. It's just that you can't give away money and expect to immediately get a higher rate of age pension. You just need to factor it into the overall situation. If you can afford to pay for the private school fees, then great. And it just means that, some of the gifts, so you're allowed to gift $10,000 in a financial year with a maximum of $30,000 over a 5-year period. So any gifting within that allowance will reduce your assets and your age pension increases accordingly. But any gifting outside of that allowable area is held on record for 5 years. And it's only after that 5-year period that it comes off your assets and then your age pension amount can increase a bit more. Is there a better way to do it? I would talk to your financial planner about that and say, look, this is what we want to do. We want to make sure our kids have this opportunity to go to this school, or that our grandkids can do this. How can we best do it for our own financial situation? And they'll be able to have some different options for you. The gist of it is that the earlier that you make the gift, the earlier the 5 years is finished. So you might make a decision and say to your kids, okay, we think that the private school fees is going to cost this much over the next 10 years. We're going to give you this amount of money now and call it a day. And if you did transfer a lump sum to your children for that purpose, that 5 year can start counting from now, and 5 years from now, it's done. And your assets will be lower and your age pension can be increased. Yeah, the gist of it is like the earlier you can do the gifting, the earlier it comes off your record and it won't be affecting you anymore. But in terms of products and things, you can talk to your financial planner, and there might be some ways to do it that is beneficial or more beneficial for you in terms of Centrelink, and maybe even for tax purposes and for your kids and grandkids. Yeah, that's beyond my knowledge, but that would be something to talk to the planner about.
Fantastic, Rebecca. Thank you. Now, finally, Jim asks, my wife and I live in the city near a top university. Our granddaughter will be studying here and we would like to offer her to board with us. Does her boarding affect our age pension? Can she get Centrelink assistance?
Okay, so this is a nice situation. Granddaughter's coming to study at uni and maybe she will board with the grandparents. Firstly, does the boarding affect our age pension? So having her stay with you does not affect age pension. And whether or not you need to tell Centrelink depends on whether or not you are charging her board. Now, if you're not charging her any board, then you don't have to tell Centrelink. She's just staying in your house and that's totally fine. You are allowed to have people in your home. You're allowed to, have visitors. You're allowed to have boarders, families stay long term. That's totally fine and does not affect your age pension. Where it can affect your age pension is if you are charging lodgings or rent or board to the people who are staying with you. Let's say you charge her $250 a week board, and that covers her room, her utilities, and the food. If you're charging her board, that is something you do need to declare to Centrelink, because a portion of the board is counted as income. It's not the full amount. When you're providing room and all meals for the person staying with you, only 20% of the amount you charge is counted as income, because they kind of say, well, if you're providing food for the person, then a lot of that money that you're charging them is actually you're spending it on food, on electricity, on the water bill, that kind of thing. So only 20% of the amount is classed as income. If you're charging $250 a week, $500 a fortnight, then 20% of that is just $100 a fortnight. If you're on a part pension, then that extra $100 may reduce your pension a little bit. If you're on a full pension, it probably won't, but it depends on exactly what your other income and assets are. But for people on a full pension, a couple on a full pension can have up to $380 of income a fortnight with no effect on their age pension. So if we're using these figures, so $500 a fortnight, only $100 counts as income, and that's well under the $380 a fortnight limit. So it's probably not going to affect their age pension. Depends on the whole situation. Yeah, if you're charging her board, or can affect the age pension, and you will need to declare it. If you just ask her to pay part of the food bill or pay part of the water bill, then that would not be considered income, because that's just directly reimbursing costs. But either way, it's probably not going to affect age pension much at all. Now, some people will say, hang on, I thought that if you had family living with you, that what you charge them doesn't count as income. That's only close family, which is defined by Centrelink basically being a first-degree relative. So a close family member is your parent or your child or your sibling. So a grandchild is outside of that and is not considered close family. The exception to that would be which is not this situation, but if the grandchild had been, in your care since they were a child, they're effectively like a child, not a grandchild. That would be a different situation, but that's not Jim's situation. This is a grandchild who has been living with her own family and then is coming to board with them for university.
Such an amazing answer. What a wealth of information this has been. For our international listeners wishing to join the Facebook group, our code word is yellow. As always, this has been information only and not personal advice. Amazing, Rebecca. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.